Hi everyone, I'm here today to do a book review, and it isn't of Brandon Sanderson's Skyward, which I know that I said was going to be my next video, because I actually got a proof copy from a publisher, so I decided to plough on with that book and actually work on that review first. So the book that I'm actually going to be reviewing today, with my fresh haircut that I got a couple of weeks ago, is Rapids by Anna Bowles. And this is a very interesting book. It caught my eye from the emails, mainly because it's a book that sort of advertised itself as going through a lot of complex themes, including mental health, bipolar disorder, and a couple of other things as well. So it really kind of drew my attention, so I picked it up and I'm here to review it today. So I'll start out just by reading the blurb from Waterstone's website, because it doesn't actually have one on the proof copy, so it's going to be a phone job. Sorry. It says, Jan Harris is very excited. Well, of course she is. It's summer, she's got over her depression, and she's in London for a week with her BFF Chelsea. After 17 years in a sleepy village where everybody knows them as the Chinese one and the brainy one, life is calling. It's a pretty cool prospect, if Chel can stop worrying about discourse in the Nordhelm fandom long enough to enjoy it. Chelsea's worried about Jan too, to Jan's annoyance. Barely sleeping, barely eating, getting increasingly gobby, having an close encounter in a toilet, giving a Tory MP a good kick in the shins, and running around kind of literally screaming. Well, it's all good, just summer fun, isn't it? Isn't it? In the desperate battle of Jan versus bipolar disorder, does the poor disease really stand a chance? So that was the really rapidly read blurb, which is ironic because the book's called Rapids. One interesting aspect about the marketing for the book as well that I found was that it actually calls bipolar a disease in the actual poster. I was a little bit puzzled by this. I don't believe it's currently categorised as a disease, so this to me was a little bit like, could be problematic. But in terms of historical accuracy, I think that is how it was originally categorised. I did ask a neurodiverse friend about this actually. So in terms of that, I think maybe that could have been modernised a little bit more as well, and not use the term disease, because I don't know if it's quite appropriate. But then again, I'm not going to question it if that is from Anna Bowles herself, because as someone who does deal with and, lives with bipolar herself, I feel like she, would know what to call it. It just kind of struck me as a little bit weird, so I just thought I'd mention it in the video, because I do think that other people, when they read that, might have the same kind of reaction. So it's something that is obviously worth bringing up. So as the blurb describes, Jan and Chelsea go on this trip to London, which is very, very different to their kind of hometown, Brockford, which is colloquially referred to as Brocky throughout the book. It's kind of an entirely different world, and Jan's really, really excited by it. It's something that she has always felt would be more appropriate for her, somewhere that she would really feel at home and kind of be able to explore herself and get out there and just be Jan. What Jan and Chelsea really want to do when they're in London is just enjoy themselves, get out of their comfort zone, and kind of explore different things that they've never done before. So it is a novel that looks into a lot of complex issues as part of that. Jan, for instance, the awkward encounter in the toilet is actually her first time having sex with a boy, and that's something that she's never explored before, so it's a really raw encounter that you read. And it also sees the characters kind of take on different roles between themselves as well. They talk about things that maybe they wouldn't have faced before, sort of issues between them that they haven't acknowledged or wouldn't want to kind of push in their hometown for whatever reason. Chelsea, for instance, is a very keen fanfic writer for the Nordhelm fandom, which is a fictional TV show based in the Viking era, and it's quite interesting to see how she comes out of her shell, whether due to Jan forcing it or not, and just to see her embracing her own abilities as, more than just the brainy one. She actually has this passion for writing and for entertaining and actually getting to know people on a basis like that. So Jan's journey with bipolar is perhaps the biggest element of the novel. It's something that is very keenly marketed in the actual advertising for the book, and I thought the journey for her was quite complex in a way. It started off quite slow at the start of the book. You know that she's had the blip, which is her previous depressive episode that lasted for quite a few months, and she's trying to recover from that and kind of deal with the trauma of that. But then she's also got this growing sensation in her head that something isn't quite right, and that there's so much going on that she can't deal with. And it becomes very clear very quickly that this is growing more and more when she spends this time in London. She's developing these sentiments in her head that things are getting really crazy, really loud. She feels compelled to kind of run, hide, do different things, and it's really quite raw, the experience that you're reading, and it helps that Anna Bowles herself is actually a bipolar author. She is someone that deals with that condition and lives with that condition herself, so she knows that experience. It's very, very authentic, and it's really interesting actually that you're reading this from the perspective of Jan. It's a first-person narration from her perspective, and I think that really does cement in that kind of really raw experience for the reader, really. And it was something that I actually struggled with a little bit. So at times I did find the writing itself quite challenging. The way that the book is actually written is from Jan's perspective, but actually the way that it's written in terms of the actual words used is also how you would say it in her kind of dialect. So it's something that's a lot more personal and a lot more, in a way, difficult to read, because you have to read it as she would be thinking it. So, for instance, when she starts to mix up her words because her brain's running so fast that she can't think clearly, these words in the book are actually switched around and the letters are switched around, and you can kind of see the struggle that she's going through, which is really, really heartbreaking in a way. You read this and you're like, wow, I could really imagine someone dealing with this, and I think that's a really powerful aspect of the novel, and it's something that I did really enjoy about it. On the other hand though, I did find this writing quite difficult, as I say, to read, and I think that, at some parts the actual emphasis and the kind of goal of it is lost a little bit. There were times that I kind of read it and I was like, I feel like I would be enjoying this more and I would be understanding this experience more if I actually could understand the writing more. So there is an element of that I think both kind of enhances and detracts from the purpose of the novel. So it's something to be aware of if you do struggle with reading itself. If for instance you have dyslexia, you might find it difficult to actually put these words together. And I think that's something that is important to be aware of. So in terms of the overall book, it actually, as I said at the start, does cover a lot of complex issues. So there's a lot of things packed in there. It's a very, very emotional ride, and I think it's something that both works really well and also doesn't. There are some elements of the book that I am a little bit critical of, namely that some elements of it are kind of seemingly thrown in there. So there's a couple of references to certain social issues, for instance, and societal issues that maybe don't feel necessary or that don't feel like they quite hit home. One of these issues, for instance, is at one point in the novel, Jan and Chelsea go clubbing with a group of her cousin, I think it is, Kieran's friends. And actually, when they're about to meet up with Kieran's friends, he says to her, oh, is it a problem? God, that was so Yorkshire. Oh, yeah, so he says to her, do you have any problem with transgender women? Because one of his friends is actually a trans woman. And Jan goes, no problem at all. But that is literally the only focus of this entire transgender issue. Like, it's just one mention kind of thrown in there, and it feels a little bit reductive. It feels a little bit like it's just tokenism and it's just been put in there just to kind of have that representation. And it doesn't really go into that issue any further. So obviously it does feel like it's a good reference. It's not something that is making a big deal out of it, and it's certainly not making it seem like something that is wrong, which is great. Trans people are people at the end of the day. They deserve to live their lives. So, it's something that I did feel was a little bit weird to have in there because it didn't feel like it served any greater purpose ultimately, but it's something that, is nice for those that are actually interested in those kind of social issues. In terms of the actual volume of issues, like I say, there was quite a lot, so it didn't only cover bipolar disorder, mental health, depression, anxiety, and things like that, but also different issues such as financial troubles, manic episodes, crime, and kind of campaigning for causes like economic or environmental reasons. So there's quite a lot of things that are packed into this one book, and I feel like it does try to cover a lot of bases, which is both amazing and also kind of detrimental. I think that it could have done with kind of narrowing its focus a little bit to kind of try and keep to, a certain storyline that was a little bit easier to follow. For instance, the actual subject of Jan's father. So this is something that very early on is identified. She doesn't have a father. He left when she was young due to her parents splitting up. And, she's on this quest to find him. She hires a PI, a private investigator, to find him, and, she really wants to meet him, or at least find out what has happened to him. And at the start, this does feel like a very loose thread. It doesn't feel like it's really related to the wider story. It becomes relevant by the end, so it's understandable why it's there. But at the same time, I think that actual resolution at the end could have been easily brought into the book without the actual string throughout. So I think, you know, in that kind of area, that could have been one element of the book, for instance, that would have made sense to be a little bit more reduced and not so much of a factor. Because I think Yan's journey with bipolar and her entire kind of mission in London to discover herself and be comfortable with who she is and learn, you know, how to manage her condition on its own was actually pretty powerful. So it didn't really need the added stuff on top, but it was still obviously a really great aspect of the book that by the end you really know why Yan is so invested in this journey to find her father, and it becomes, you know, especially relevant when she discovers certain things about him that, you know, relate to her own personal journey as well. So the final thing that I'd like to bring up before concluding this review and kind of summarising my thoughts on it is the actual language used in the book. So it isn't something that normally would strike me as odd or perhaps a little bit strange, especially when it's written as a first-person narrative and, you know, it's taken from Jan's perspective. But I did just feel that there were some kind of phrases and words in there that maybe have kind of gone beyond their welcome in 2021. You know, it's a little bit strange to read cigarettes still being referred to as fags, for instance. And, you know, there's a lot of swearing in there, and it is understandable, especially with the condition, but at some points you kind of just read it and you're like, this feels a little bit forced, or it feels a little bit excessive, and it doesn't really feel like it has a purpose. You know, there's certain parts of the book where you kind of just read it and you think, But yeah, I did have some just minor issues with those kind of terms that just felt a little bit dated or didn't feel like they really added anything to the story. It was just thrown in there as a colloquialism or kind of appropriate language for the area. I also was a little bit surprised. At the end of the book, there is a little segment at the end that kind of implies there may be a sequel. And I'm not sure if there is going to be a sequel or if this is just kind of a nice addition at the back, but it does include a little bit of Chelsea's writing as if she's starting a new fanfic, and also, you know, it's talking about Chelsea's Guide to Nordhelm, so this seems like it could be a companion book or maybe a sequel, or that there's going to be some new content that's coming out after that. And in terms of a sequel, I'm not sure really where the book will go. So Jan's journey to actually discover her condition has been completed. You know, she has been diagnosed and she's getting treatment at the end of the book, so there's certainly, you know, things that could be delved into, like their lives at college and university. So there's definitely themes out there, but in terms of the sequel, if there is one, I have no idea where it's going to go, but I would be interested to read it and see how Jan and Chelsea are doing. So yeah, on the whole, I'm going to give Anna Bowles' Rapids 3 out of 5 because I really did love the story of Jan. I thought that she was an intensely likeable character in many ways. There were some problematic aspects to her character, for instance, that I didn't really relate to, such as her shoplifting and just her general attitude towards her friends at some points. I thought that was really harsh and possibly not something that I could ever foresee doing, but obviously knew that and understood that it could be part of the bipolar condition itself, which I was reading about. And, you know, the actual problematic elements of the book as well for me were kind of a little bit detractive. So, you know, I did feel like it did try to discuss a lot of issues at once. I did feel like there was a little bit of confusion, especially in the writing style and kind of how things were written at times, and also just the language as well. At some points I did feel was a little bit excessive or maybe not appropriate, or in essence just not really suitable for the story itself. Like, that was just my personal feelings on it. But yeah, overall I would really recommend this book to anyone that does have any kind of experience with bipolar, or even who doesn't, because I think it is really insightful to kind of have a look into the mind of Jan and see how this condition really manifests itself in her kind of mind, and also just how she had to deal with it, and, you know, how it actually impacted her, her friends, her family, and everyone around her, and kind of what that actually means for people who deal and kind of live with that condition. If you're planning on picking this book up, or if you would like to read it yourself and let me know your thoughts, I would really, really love to hear from you. It's been an enjoyable book, and I'm really thankful to Zuntal Publishing for actually sending it over to me and letting me have the opportunity to review it here on YouTube, so thank you very much to you guys. If there's any other books that you guys would like to recommend that similarly discuss topics about mental health or societal issues, or just anything that you think that would be of interest to me, please do send those recommendations over, because I'm really getting into reading again and I'm excited to actually check out some other books. I promise that my reviews of Skyward and also Starsight, have I got that the right way up? No, because I'm not that good. Starsight, and then also Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig. All of these reviews that I'm intending on writing and also maybe making for YouTube, I will get on as soon as possible, and then they'll be up here on YouTube very soon. So thank you all for watching this review. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that it's been helpful and insightful to learn about Rapids, and if you have any questions, concerns, or anything, just let me know, and have a nice day. Bye!